I'm falling deeply for you. Please be mine.
Mariam's husband stopped caring. Her Korean boss started paying attention and being nice to her. And slowly, without meaning to, she started falling for him. What she didn't know was that her boss was married to one of the most powerful and feared women in all of Seoul. Her spy was watching them. His wife already knew everything. She was just waiting for the right time to strike. This is how it all happened. Watch the full story from the beginning.
If you don't come back to Mali with me, this entire marriage is over. We will go our separate ways.
If you refuse to come back with me to Mali, this marriage is over, her husband said sternly. Mariam had not even put down her bag. She stood in the doorway of their Seoul apartment, still in her work coat, the cold of the February night still clinging to her collar. Sekou was sitting on the couch. He appeared calm the way a man is calm when he has finished taking a decision. She looked at him. He looked back. "You heard me," he said. Her bag slid off her shoulder. It hit the floor. She did not pick it up. If you want to understand how 11 years of love and sacrifice leads a woman to that doorway, subscribe right now, like this video, and stay until the very last second. You will not regret it. It didn't start in Seoul. It started in Bamako, Mali, on a warm evening that smelled of grilled meat and generator smoke, at a wedding where everyone danced and had so much to eat that nobody wanted to go home. Sekou and Mariam met each other there. Mariam Koulibaly was 24. She was standing near the drinks table, watching her cousin attempt a dance move that had no name, when a voice beside her said, "He's going to regret that tomorrow." She turned. Sekou Traoré was already smiling. He was the kind of man who made you feel, within the first 5 minutes, that you were the most interesting person he had ever met. He asked questions and actually waited for the answers. He laughed easily. He talked about his future not like a fantasy, but like a blueprint, specific, detailed, inevitable. A business, logistics, cross-border trade across West Africa. "I just need the right foundation," he said. "The right environment. The right person." He was looking at her when he said it. Mariam felt butterflies in her belly. Mariam's mother, Fatoumata, met him 3 weeks later over dinner in their compound. She watched him the way she watched everything, closely, completely, without giving anything away. After he left while washing the dishes, she said, "He has big dreams, that one," without turning around. "Is that a bad thing?" Mariam asked. Fatoumata dried her hands slowly. "Depends on who he expects to carry them." Mariam heard her. She just didn't understand her yet. They married 14 months later. The celebration lasted 3 days. Fatoumata cooked until her feet swelled. The courtyard was loud and bright, and full of the kind of joy that makes you believe the future is guaranteed. Mariam danced until past midnight, her new husband's hand warm in hers, and she thought, this is it. This is the beginning of everything good. She was right. It was a beginning. She just didn't know yet what she was intentionally walking into. 2 years into the marriage, Sekou came home with so much excitement on his face. He sounded so sure about his perfect, mapped-out plan. He was so confident that this was going to be his big break. A Kenyan investor. A logistics opportunity. Nairobi. Mariam had just taken on her 5th tailoring client in Bamako. Her hands were good with fabric. She didn't just sew, she understood fabric. She would look at a fabric and client, already knowing the perfect style that would fit. She had started building something small and real. She looked at her half-finished orders on the work table, and then she looked at her husband's face. It was difficult, but she agreed to move with him. He trusted his dreams. She packed their suitcases. That was her life reduced to what could be lifted and carried. She left her clients, her mother, the compound, the street she had known since she was 7 years old. She followed Sekou's dream across a continent and told herself, this is just one of those things we do for love. Nairobi received them with noise and traffic. They settled in a flat in Westlands. Sekou was immediately consumed with calls, meetings, late nights bent over his laptop at the kitchen table. spreadsheets glowing on his face past midnight. Mariam found a job at a textile shop within the first month. She needed something to do with her hands, and they needed the income. She met Nafi 6 weeks in. Nafi ran the accessories stall next door, had opinions about everything, and delivered honesty casually, directly, without apology. They became friends. One afternoon, Sekou came to pick Mariam up from work. He honked from outside. Didn't go in. Mariam grabbed her bag quickly, said goodbye to Nafi, and went out. Nafi watched from the doorway. The next morning, she said, he couldn't walk 10 steps to come inside. Mariam laughed it off. He was in a hurry. Nafi looked at her steadily. Is he always in a hurry? Mariam didn't answer, which was itself an answer. 18 months after Nairobi, the business flopped. The investor withdrew without warning. The contracts that had seemed so solid turned out to have been built on the man's enthusiasm rather than any real commitment. The money was gone, the investors, Sekou's, and a quiet portion of Mariam's earnings that she had contributed without being asked and without making a point of it. Sekou came home on a Tuesday and sat at the kitchen table and stared at nothing for hours. Mariam sat beside him. She put her hand on his. We'll get through this, she said. Together. She meant it. Every word. But she was about to learn that together meant something different to each of them. For Mariam, together meant doubling her hours at the shop, taking in private alterations at night, sewing by lamplight when her eyes were already burning. It meant calling Fat Almada every Sunday and saying, "We're managing, Mama," in a voice carefully calibrated to sound like the truth. It meant absorbing Sekou's shame and frustration daily, because she understood that failure had a particular weight for a man who had promised so much. She gave him space. She gave him patience. She gave him time. What she did not give herself was permission to fall apart. There was no room for that. Sekou, meanwhile, grew quieter. The shame of the failed business sat in him like something infected, and instead of letting Mariam close enough to help, he kept her at a distance and then blamed her for not being close. He stopped asking about her day, stopped noticing that she came home tired every single night. When she walked in and went straight to the bedroom one evening without stopping to greet him, he looked up from his phone and said, "What's wrong with you?" She stopped at the bedroom door, turned slowly. "I've been on my feet for 11 hours, Sekou. Ask me how I am, not what's wrong with me." He looked back at his phone. She went to bed. Nafi saw it happening in real time. "Mariam," she said one afternoon, sitting across from her with 2 cups of tea between them, "you look like someone who has been holding their breath for a very long time." "I'm fine." "Stop saying that." Nafi's voice was not unkind. It was precise. "When is it your turn? When does someone hold something for you?" Mariam wrapped both hands around her cup, looked down at the tea, said nothing, because she didn't know, and not knowing frightened her more than she was willing to admit. Then the email came. A fashion distribution company based in Seoul, South Korea, was expanding aggressively into African markets. They needed a senior liaison, someone who understood African textiles from the inside, spoke French, had cultural fluency. Mariam's name had been passed along by a former contact who had worked with her briefly in Bamako. The salary figure made her sit up straight. She read the email 4 times before she said anything to Sekou. She chose a Sunday evening after supper, when the apartment was calm and he was in a decent mood. "Korea," he said. Not a question. More like a word he was testing for absurdity. "It's a big position. Senior level. The pay is serious. Mariam, I'm trying to rebuild something here." "There is nothing left to rebuild here, Sekou." She said it gently, but she did not soften it. "We both know that. This is a chance. A real one. And it came for me." That last sentence landed in a way she hadn't quite intended. She watched something move across his face, quick, complicated. Pride, maybe. Or the threat to it. 3 days later, he finally accepted to move to Korea. But this was only because Mariam's pay would handle the bills of the family. She thought it was love, that after all the years she had shown up for him, he was finally showing up for her. She didn't know any better. They arrived Seoul in winter. The cold was a different species from anything she had known, direct, physical, uninterested in whether you were ready for it. But the morning she walked into JW Fashion Group and was shown through the studio bolts of fabric from 15 countries, mood boards covering entire walls, the quiet hum of creative work underway, something in her chest opened like a window. She was home in a way she hadn't been anywhere in years. Her boss was Ryu Yiwon. He was not what she expected. Quiet, economical with words. He shook her hand on day one and told her the company had high expectations and that she should feel free to exceed them. "I just want to see results," he said. She respected him before the week was out. She was brilliant at the work. She knew it and she didn't apologize for it. Her instinct for African textiles, her understanding of how culture lives inside cloth, made her invaluable in ways the company hadn't fully anticipated when they hired her. Within 3 weeks, Ryu Yiwon was including her in meetings she had not been scheduled for. He listened when she spoke. He disagreed with her sometimes, directly, without condescension, and then occasionally changed his position when her argument was stronger. He treated her like her mind was worth something. She had forgotten what that felt like. At home, Sekou was coming apart quietly. Seoul defeated him in ways Nairobi never had. In Nairobi, he had had a purpose, even if it failed. Here he had nothing, no language, no network, no role. He was dependent on Mariam in a way that inverted everything he understood about himself, and it hollowed him out and made him mean. Not dramatically mean. The small, daily kind, a tone, a look, a comment delivered just under the level where it could be directly addressed. "I want to go back to Kenya," he said one night. They were eating in silence, the television on low, Seoul glittering outside the window. "Give it more time." "I've been giving it time. This place is not for me." "I felt that way in Nairobi," Mariam said. "For 3 years. I didn't leave. That was different." She set her fork down carefully. "Tell me how." He said nothing. He looked at his plate. And in his silence, she heard the answer he would never say out loud. It was different because it was his dream. Because her comfort had never been accounted for in the calculations of their marriage. Because Mariam was expected to absorb and adjust and endure, and Sekou was expected to be absorbed for. She picked up her fork, finished her food, did not cry until she was in the shower, where the sound of water covered everything. Her colleague Celeste noticed the shift before Mariam could name it. Celeste was Congolese, sharp, unhurried, the kind of woman who observed everything quietly. One morning, watching Ryu Yiwon pause at Mariam's desk for the 3rd time that week, she leaned over and said quietly, "Be careful with that one." "He's my boss," Mariam said, not looking up. "I know who he is," Celeste said. "I'm telling you to be careful anyway." Mariam said nothing. But on the subway home that night, packed into a crowded car with Seoul rushing past the windows, she sat with Celeste's words and felt the truth of them land somewhere soft. She was lonely. Genuinely, deeply lonely inside a marriage that had stopped seeing her. And Ryu Yiwon saw her every single day. He remembered things she said once in passing. He had quietly ensured she was included in a Paris showcase when management initially overlooked her name. Their late evening conversations over fabric samples had begun drifting, slowly, barely noticeably, away from work and into something without a clear name. She was not foolish. She knew what loneliness did to a person's judgment. But knowing a thing and stopping it are different skills entirely. Sekou delivered the ultimatum on a Thursday evening in February. She came home late from a campaign review. He was sitting in the living room, lights low, his half-packed suitcase visible through the bedroom doorway. She had barely stepped inside. "If you refuse to come back with me to Mali," he said, "this marriage is over. We will go our separate ways." 11 years. 2 countries. 3 suitcases packed in his name. And he sat there calm, certain, and gave her an ultimatum like she was an employee who had missed a deadline. Mariam looked at him for a long time. Then she said very quietly, "Is that your final answer?" He didn't flinch. "Yes." She nodded once, slowly, picked her bag up off the floor, and walked to the bedroom. She did not sleep. She lay in the dark and made the only decision left to make. She did not ask him to stay. That was the part that surprised her most. She had expected to beg, expected to cry, expected to spend the night bargaining with herself the way she had spent so many nights in Nairobi, talking herself into patience, into staying, into one more day. Instead, there was just quiet. A strange, flat quiet inside her chest that she didn't fully understand until morning. She made tea. 1 cup. Sekou came out of the spare room, saw the single cup on the counter, and stopped. "So that's it," he said. "You gave me a choice," Mariam said. "I made it." "Mariam, just listen. You told me our marriage was over if I didn't follow you." She turned to look at him. "I believed you. So now I'm agreeing with you." He stood there watching her with anger in his eyes. He flew back to Kenya 4 days later without saying goodbye. She stood in the apartment after the door closed and looked at the space he had occupied, and tears enveloped her. She missed him, she did love him after all, he was her husband. The quiet, aching sadness of 11 years. She was 35 years old. She had spent her best and most energetic years managing his dreams, his moods, his failures, his ego. She had abandoned her career twice for a man who, when it was finally her turn, couldn't last 4 months in a city for her sake. She sat down on the floor, right there in the middle of the apartment. She thought about the tailoring clients she had left in Bamako, the small business she had been building with her own hands before she folded it up and followed him. She thought about where she might be now professionally, creatively, if she had stayed. If she had chosen herself even once, the way she had chosen him every single time without hesitation. She let herself grief. Then she called Fatoumata. "Mama." A pause. "Tell me." She told her everything. All of it. When she finished, the line was quiet for a moment. "I saw it," Fatoumata said softly. "That evening he left our compound. I saw it and I dried my hands and said nothing. It wouldn't have changed anything." "No, but you would have known I saw it." Her mother's voice was steady and warm. "You are 35, Mariam. Not dead. Not finished. You hear me?" Mariam wiped her face with the back of her hand. "I hear you. Good. Now go and build something." She went and built something. She arrived at JW Fashion Group every morning before anyone else. She stayed late. She led the African textiles campaign with a precision and passion that made the entire company sit up. She sourced fabrics directly from artisans in Mali, Senegal, Kenya, and Ghana. She built narratives around each collection that made international buyers stop and pay attention, not out of curiosity, but out of genuine want. The work was extraordinary. She knew it. She let herself know it. Ryu Yiwon noticed everything. He began staying late on the evenings she stayed late. Their conversations, which had always been sharp and professional, started drifting, gradually, almost imperceptibly, into something warmer. He remembered details she mentioned once in passing. He ensured she was included in a Paris showcase trip when her name had been quietly left off the initial list. He looked at her in meetings with an attention that was different from how he looked at everyone else, and she noticed, and she told herself it was professional respect, and she almost believed it. One evening, the office had emptied completely. They were reviewing the final layout for the campaign launch, standing side by side over a wide table covered in prints and fabric swatches. He reached across to move a photograph, and his hand brushed hers. Neither of them moved for a moment. Then he turned to look at her. She turned to look at him. And before she could say anything sensible, he kissed her. It was not brief. It was not accidental. It was the kind of kiss that had been building for months and finally ran out of patience. She kissed him back. When they pulled apart, she pressed her fingers to her mouth and looked at him, and he looked back at her with something in his eyes that she did not know how to read. He said her name. Just her name. Quietly, like it meant something. She gathered her things and left. On the subway home, her heart was beating too fast. She sat in her seat and stared at the dark window and tried to be sensible. But she was 35 and she had been lonely for a very long time, and the man had kissed her like. She was worth kissing, and her body and her heart were not interested in being sensible right now. She got home, showered, lay in bed, and stared at the ceiling with a small, private smile she couldn't stop. Her phone lit up at 11:45. It was him. I've been thinking about you all evening. I don't want to pretend that didn't happen. I don't want to pretend I don't feel what I feel. You have brought something back to life in me that I thought was gone. I think I'm falling in love with you, Mariam. She read it 3 times. Her chest was full of something warm and complicated and frightening. She fell asleep with the phone on her pillow. She did not know that someone had been outside the building that evening. She did not know that the moment in the window, he took a picture of them kissing and sent it to the boss, wife. On Tuesday, Mariam was leaving the building after a client meeting, crossing the wide pavement toward the main road, when a car pulled up and stopped directly in her path. Not a regular car. Long black, the kind of car that announced money without saying a word. The engine idled. Nobody moved. Then the rear window descended slowly. Seo Hye-rin. She was perhaps 42. Exquisitely dressed, not a detail out of place, the kind of beautiful that had been maintained and weaponized simultaneously. She looked at Mariam from behind the open window with eyes that were completely calm and absolutely dangerous. "Get in," she said. Mariam did not move. "I don't think. I'm not going to hurt you. Come on, let's make this quick." Something in her voice made Mariam believe her. She got in. The interior was cool and smelled of something expensive. Seo Hye-rin did not look at her immediately. She looked straight ahead for a moment, like she was deciding exactly how much of herself to spend on this conversation. Then she turned. "I have the photograph," she said. "I want you to know that first, so we are not wasting each other's time." Mariam said nothing. "My husband is charming," Seo Hye-rin continued. "He is also foolish in the particular way that charming men are foolish. This is not the first time." She said it without emotion, which somehow made it worse. "I deal with it. What I do not allow is for it to go further than it already has." "Ma'am, I have ended careers," she said simply. "I have connections in this industry across 12 countries. I am telling you this not to frighten you, but because I prefer honesty to games." She looked at Mariam directly. "Walk away from my husband. Completely. Whatever this is, end it." She pressed a button and the car door clicked open. "You're talented," Seo Hye-rin said as Mariam moved to leave. "I mean that. Don't make yourself a footnote in my husband's story when you could be the headline of your own." The window rose. The car pulled away. Mariam stood on the pavement, breathing heavily. The next morning she walked into Ryu Yi-won's office, closed the door, and placed her phone on his desk with the screenshot of his message visible on the screen. He looked at it. Then he looked at her. "His wife came to see me," Mariam said. He closed his eyes. "Mariam, you're married." "Yes. You kissed me. You sent me that message telling me how much you love me. You knew exactly who you were and what you had, and you still..." She stopped. Steadied herself. "I need you to explain that to me." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "My marriage has been empty for years. Hye-rin and I, there is no warmth there. No connection. It is a structure, a business arrangement that we have both stopped pretending is anything else. She is consumed by her quest for power, that the only things she cares for are wealth and status. When I met you, when I saw how you worked and how you thought and who you were, he paused. You sparked up those feelings and emotions in me that were long dead. I'm sorry. I know this is inexcusable. But it's true. Mariam looked at him for a long time. And she believed him. That was the difficult part. She could hear the truth in it. A man in a cold, controlled marriage reaching toward something warm and alive. She understood loneliness. She had lived in it for years. But understanding something is not the same as accepting it. I feel sorry for you, she said. Genuinely. But I have just come out of one difficult marriage. I am not walking into someone else's, she straightened. I'm sorry about your unhappiness, but it is also not my problem to solve. He nodded slowly. He did not argue. She respected that. Can we still work together? He asked. Professionally, she said. Completely professionally. Nothing else. Okay, he said quietly. She walked out of his office and back to her desk and opened her laptop and got to work. Her hands were steady. Her mind was clear. Celeste appeared beside her desk within the hour, said nothing, and placed a cup of coffee in front of her. Mariam looked up. You knew. I suspected, Celeste said. I'm glad you're okay. I'm fine, Mariam said. Then she caught herself and laughed, small, dry, real. Actually fine this time. The months that followed were the most productive of her career. With nothing pulling her attention sideways, she poured everything into the work. The African Textiles campaign won an industry award. Her name began appearing in fashion publications, Seoul, Lagos, Paris, Accra. She was invited to speak at a conference in Nairobi, which she attended with a kind of quiet pride that she didn't have to perform for anyone. She was building something. Finally, in her own name. She met Kwame at a fashion showcase in Itiwan on a Thursday evening in spring. She almost didn't go, she had been tired, had considered sending Celeste instead, but something made her put on her coat and go. He was standing in front of her campaign installation. A series of Mali and Bogolan fabrics shot against Seoul's steel and glass architecture. He was studying it with the specific attention of someone who was not just looking, but actually seeing. She stopped beside him. Whoever made this, he said without turning, understands that beauty doesn't need to justify itself. I made it, she said. He turned, looked at her, looked at the installation placard, looked back at her and laughed a real laugh, warm and unguarded. Of course you did, he said. His name was Kwame. Ghanaian Korean, a textile photographer whose work she had seen and admired without knowing who was behind it. They talked for 2 hours without noticing the time. About fabric and photography. They chattered away into the night and actually lost track of time. They got home late. They met for coffee the following week. And the week after. There was no rush between them. When he told her he was interested in her, he said it simply. I want to spend more time with you. I think you're remarkable, and I'd like you to know that I'm saying it clearly because I think you deserve clarity. And she looked at him and felt something loosen in her chest that she hadn't realized was still held tight. She chose him, deliberately with open eyes, without desperation or loneliness driving the decision. He showed up. Every time, exactly when he said he would. He was proud of her work in a way that had no competition in it. He made room for her without being asked. He loved her the way steady people love, not loudly, not desperately, but consistently. Like a choice he kept making every day. One evening, they were sitting on her apartment floor surrounded by fabric samples for the next campaign. He was holding up a length of deep indigo bazin rich, asking her why she always returned to that particular fabric. And she was explaining about the way it held light, about its weight and fluidity, about how it reminded her of her mother's house on Sunday mornings, and she stopped mid-sentence and looked around. Fabric everywhere. Seoul outside the window. Her name on an award sitting on the shelf. This man on her floor, genuinely curious, watching her with quiet warmth. What, he said. I'm happy, she said. Straightforward, like she was confirming something she'd wondered about for a while. He smiled. Good. She smiled back. Yes, she said. Good. Mariam Coulibaly had sacrificed much for love in her past marriage. She had worked in silence, endured in silence, loved without being loved back. She had survived a dead marriage, a hidden betrayal, and a woman in a black car who could end careers with a phone call. She had sat on her apartment floor and grieved the years. She had let herself feel the weight of what she had given and what she had lost. And then she had stood up. She had built something extraordinary, not just in the fashion industry, in herself, and this time she did it in her own name. A few weeks into the relationship, Quame proposed, and this time she was willing to give love a second chance. If Mariam's story stayed with you, hit that like button right now and subscribe, because there are more stories like this one coming. Women who chose themselves. What it cost them, what they found on the other side. Drop a comment below, tell us which moment hit you the hardest. We read every single one. Thank you for watching until the very end.